Final Fantasy XIV's second expansion, Stormblood, told a very complex and nuanced story full of highs and lows from two different conflicts on opposite sides of the world. Stormblood introduced tons of new characters and cultures as the player was pushed through its roughly 50-hour story, and by the time all was said and done, many things had changed in Girabania in the Far East, and the player is left with a myriad of questions about all kinds of things. Truly, with the vast story Stormblood told and the things alluded to in its ending, Stormblood desperately needed an epilogue. The 4.x patches that followed Stormblood filled that hole by providing a comprehensive epilogue to the story of Stormblood and the people the player had met along the way, and this patch cycle serves its purpose remarkably well. Unlike the 3.x patches, 4.x chose to take a different route and take its time to close the Stormblood chapter throughout its patches, instead of continuing to build upon what preceded the patch cycle. Today we will be going over the 4.x patches. More specifically, we will be going over the first three patches of 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, and my thoughts and experiences with them. And patches 4.4 and 4.5 will be covered in a later video. In case you are unaware of why they are separate, the patches we will be talking about today are the ones that truly close the story of Stormblood and answer the questions left behind, while per norm, the latter two patches in a patch cycle set up the story for the following expansion. Also, because of the nature of this video, it will contain spoilers for the story of these patches as well as Stormblood, so if you wish to avoid spoilers, this is your chance to leave and go play through this part of the game yourself. This video will still be here when you are done. But for those of you who are staying, as always, my name is Lokidum, and this is So I Played Final Fantasy XIV, The Legend Returns. The patch that lends its name to the entirety of the 4.x series, patch 4.1 The Legend Returns, was released on October 12th of 2017, which was just under 4 months after the initial release of Stormblood. The patch added the first of the new Stormblood 24-man raids, a new housing area in the Far East, squadron updates, a new trial, and a new MSQ dungeon which came with the 11 new MSQ quests. This patch picks up right after the dust had settled in Ala Mhigo, and her people have begun to rebuild. In stark contrast to our peace brokering mission at the beginning of 3.1, 4.1 starts with the Warrior of Light, Arenvald, and Alphina going off on a treasure hunt to find the trove of the Mad King of Girabania. And that is what leads them to the MSQ dungeon for this patch, which is the Drowned City of Scala. Normally dungeons are used to enhance climactic moments in the story, then there is this one. And while being a good dungeon, it doesn't really serve any sort of fantastic narrative purpose. Inside the dungeon, they find the treasure and decide to give it to the people of Ala Mhigo to aid them in rebuilding their city. Yet, when they return to the city, they arrive to find an ongoing riot caused by the people finding out that Fordola, the leader of the Skulls, was being held within the city, and they were calling for execution. Which is a reasonable thing to request considering all of the pain she had inflicted upon the Ala Mhigan people during the Garlean occupation. Just as things look like they are going to get ugly, Raubahn swoops in and breaks everything up with an emotional speech about ending the cycle of hatred and violence once and for all, which the riders begrudgingly agree with and the crowd disperses. After the spectacle they just saw, the Warrior of Light goes to meet with Fordola in her cell along with some of the other Scions, and as the group begins to speak, the Warrior of Light's echo and Fordola's resonant kick in and show visions of the others' past to one another. We properly get to see Fordola's backstory through this plot-convenient headache and see the hatred that both the Ala Mhigans and the Garleans had for her and her family. And within this memory, we see her father getting stoned to death as he used his body to shield Fordola from the Ala Mhigans throwing rocks at them. In return, Fordola gets to see the hardships the warrior has faced up to that point, and is taken aback by the warrior's ability to keep moving forward, which leads to a nice exchange between the two. This is a really powerful scene and my favorite part of 4.1. Being able to see the tragedies that have befallen Fordola throughout her life really lets the player understand her character and why she became the monster she eventually did. But as we finally come to understand her as she is now, she once again starts to change after seeing the warrior's memories, and her character begins to shift in a different direction. This scene is great because as we come to understand her past, she begins to move forward towards her future, continuing her overarching character trait as someone who is hard to get a read on. After the scene with Fordola, the warrior is sent to Ul'dah for a meeting with the Sultana, where the two discuss Raubahn's future and how he finds himself torn between staying in his homeland and his duty to the people of Ul'dah. And we escort Nanamo as she goes undercover into her kingdom to seek the counsel of some and see the circumstances of others. Eventually, the Warrior of Light returns to Ala Mhigo to attend a summit between the regional leaders of Girabania. However, the summit attracts the Inata tribe of the Kalyana, who request a seat in the summit in interest of having their voices heard. The meeting goes well at the beginning, and progress is seemingly made towards the future. However, all of that amounts to nothing as the Kalyana demand worship of their god, the primal Lakshmi, and summon her forth to temper those present at the summit. The Warrior of Light and Arenvald take on the primal in a solo instance, as they are the only two there who possess the Echo, and thus are the only ones that can protect the others. That is until Elise runs to free Fordola, who uses her artificial echo given to her by the Resonant in order to aid the two in defeating the Primal. Once the Primal is defeated and Fordola is forced to confront the regional leaders whose people she had massacred, she is able to take another step into the future and returns to her cell with tears threatening to spill over. Meanwhile, in the Royal Garden, the warrior and Raubon have a conversation about their futures and the future of Ala Mhigo. As the discussion continues, the Sultana arrives and relieves Raubons of his duty so that he may stay in his homeland and help his people. The patch ends on Garlean soldiers discussing the death of Zenos and the rumors that he had not actually been killed, but only gravely wounded and had returned to the capital. And we see a scene of Gosetsu and Yotsuyu and Kugane, which properly enforces that the two are very much alive. Overall, this is quite a good patch besides some of the nonsense at the beginning, and is overall quite a quiet patch that focuses on the characters and their futures, hopes, and the consequences for their actions. The patch has quite a few powerful moments, and if you don't like Fordola after this patch, then there is something legitimately wrong with you. Released on January 29th of 2018, patch 4.2 Rise of a New Sun brought with it a bunch of things alongside its 8 MSQ quests. These things were 2 new dungeons, new CNE trials, the second tier of the Omega raids, job rebalancing, major PvP rebalancing, an overhaul to the glamour system making it nice and brain dead, which is possibly one of the best changes the game has ever seen. Continuing on though, subaquatic voyages were added, new housing plots were added, some performance updates, old MSQ adjustments, dungeon adjustments, and duty recorder was all added. This was a huge fucking patch, like god damn that's a lot of stuff. Jumping into the MSQ, the Warrior of Light receives a message from Hancock and Kugane informing him of 2 people matching the description of Gosetsu and Yotsuyu who had been seen around the city. The Warrior of Light rushes to the Far East where they team up with Yugiri and set out to find the two. Soon enough, they find them being attacked by Imperials in the Ruby Sea. Once they rescue the two, they converse with Gosetsu, who explains that the former Imperial Viceroy, who he now calls Tsuyu, has lost her memory and now has the demeanor of a small child. While some are doubtful of Yatsuyu's amnesia, they bring her to Doma and bring her in front of Lord Hien, whom, after pondering the situation, decides that she is no threat if she truly has lost her memories and orders her guarded and hidden within his hall. As soon as this is resolved, an Imperial airship shows up using an old Doman custom of a white smoke signal to represent the desire for a peaceful encounter. Intrigued, Hien responds in kind, and the group leaves to meet up with the Garlean envoy. The Imperial that emerges is a man named Asahi, who is of Doman descent and is also Yatsuyu's stepbrother. While this is already concerning, considering not too long before this the Imperials had attacked Yotsuyu, he claims to be part of an up till then unknown faction within Garlemald that wants to see an end to the Garlean expansion. The mysterious Imperial insists that he has come to broker peace and speaks to the Empire's true goal to rid the world of primals. He also appeals to the Scions with talks of peace and acknowledges that the Empire is actually causing more primals to be summoned. And then to top it all off, the slick Garlean suggests an exchange of prisoners as a show of good faith between the two nations. Everyone on our side is skeptical of the smooth-talking Garlean, and Hien decides to return to the Doman Enclave to think it over. While Hien returns to consider his options, the Warrior of Light and Yugiri are tasked with playing host to the Garlean and showing him around Doma, allowing him to see his homeland firsthand. We get to see his interactions with the Doman people and his general demeanor, and as this part progressed, I found myself willing to trust Asahi and believe that the intentions he spoke of were his true ones, even though at the back of my mind I was still skeptical of him, which at the time is something I felt guilty about. When we finally take him to the Doman Enclave to see Hien, the Doman Lord agrees to the exchange with the exception of Yotsuyu, saying that if she remembers nothing by the time of the exchange that she will remain in Doma, but if her situation is to change before then, she'll be handed over to the Imperials. Asahi asks to speak with his sister privately and is granted that permission, and as he leaves he remarks that it seems that she truly remembers nothing. In the final part of the patch, we are tasked with seeing the Garlean envoy off, and at this point Asahi has to speak to the warrior alone, where his face contorts into one of fury and he threatens the warrior for harming his inspiration in life, good old Zenos Galvus, the royal bastard who we spent all of Stormblood fighting. Turns out Asahi is a Zenos fanatic and promises that the warrior will pay for the events in Ala Mhigo, and with that he just leaves. And I glared with my jaw set along with my character as the Garlean envoy left. I think that's the first time I ever had the same expression as my character in a cutscene. The final scene of the patch shows Hien's steadfast desire to bring his countrymen home, Yotsuyu staring in a mirror that Asahi had given her, and we also see that Zenos Galvus is very much alive in the Imperial capital. As for a conclusion on the patch, well, I don't really have much to say, as this patch is all foundational for what is to follow. And oh boy, What is to come is by far and away one of my favorite patches. The final patch we'll be talking about today, patch 4.3 Under the Moonlight, hit the game on May 28th of 2018 and brought with it a new beast tribe in the Namazu, a new dungeon, a new MSQ trial, and the next 24-man alliance raid. Going into the MSQ, Gosetsu has managed to injure himself and is being nursed back to health by Yatsuyu, which allows us to see the heartwarming father-daughter dynamic that has grown between the old samurai and the former serial killer. Upon once again arriving in Doma, the Warrior of Light and the twins visit the samurai, who remarks he would like to have a persimmon from his home village of Namai, which spurs Tsuyu to leave the safety of the Enclave to find one. Once they notice her absence, the group runs to Namai, only to find her having been recognized by the villagers. Hien quickly tries to explain the situation while Tsuyu starts having some of her past memories flash before her of torturing the people, causing the innocent Tsuyu to break down and beg for forgiveness. This really is such a sad scene. I already liked Yatsuyu in Stormblood, and seeing her transition into Tsuyu really made me want for her to finally be given a chance to start over with the blank slate her amnesia gave her, and seeing her memories start to come back and torture the innocent girl was honestly heartbreaking. Luckily, the villagers choose to stand down, and our group and Tsuyu embark to Castrum Fluminous to meet with Asahi to demonstrate Tsuyu's memory loss. Yet, Asahi has an ace up his sleeve. He brought along Yatsuyu's parents, who were responsible for much of her past trauma which had caused her to become a monster, and once again we are forced to watch as terrible memories return to the poor girl. Yet, fortunately, they did not fully return. The conniving bastard Asahi is disappointed his trick did not work, but agrees to proceed with the prisoner exchange at the arranged time and date. But before everyone leaves, the runt whispers in Tsuyu's ear that she will soon be rejoining them. When the heroes return to the Enclave and begin to discuss, Tsuyu has once again gone missing, causing everyone to once again run to look for her. The Warrior of Light soon comes across the dying bodies of Yatsuyu's parents, and the Echo reveals that Yatsuyu's memories had returned and she had resolved to kill herself. But then her parents showed up and began to scream at her, causing her to become enraged and stab her parents to death. Watching this was a mix of feeling sad for Tsuyu, to watching happily she took out her parents, and honestly, I wanted to use my sword that I had to finish them off myself, but the game would not permit that, of course. But at the end of the memory, it shows a delighted Asahi who Yatsuyu escapes into the night with. We quickly inform Hien of the situation, and the group rushes to Castrum Fluminous. Upon arrival, Yatsuyu reveals herself in full Imperial garb and demands to be bowed before as the true leader of Doma. Hien scoffs at this and tells her simply to return to the Imperials and that her power is no longer recognized. Yatsuyu begins to scream that she will see every one of them broken and tortured, and at this moment Asahi opens a bunch of crates full of crystals, using them and his sister as a fuel for a primal summoning, and thus begins the trial of Castrum Fluminous. What a tragic fight this is. It's full of symbolism, visions, and mirages from Yatsuyu's past, and everything in this fight not only looks great, but everything has a deeper meaning to it. For example, the Phase 2 song is one of my favorites in the entire game, and it is called Wayward Daughter. And not only does it recount the tragedy of Yatsuyu and Tsuyu's lives, both in English and Japanese, but the song instrumental takes elements from the two Yanxia themes called A Mother's Pride and A Father's Pride, which adds another terribly sad layer to everything. When this fight finally finishes and Yatsuyu's body falls out of the primal, it's a terribly melancholic moment. The tortured witch of Doma has perished, but so has the innocent girl who was granted a second chance, only for it to be taken away. Yatsuyu deserved better throughout her life, and Tsuyu deserved her life. Both deserved better, but neither got a happy ending. With her body now lying on the ground, Asahi comes over and puts the final bullets into her flesh. Before going on a rant that thanks to his subtlety, he put within the peace treaty that Doma and Garlemald had signed by summoning a primal that had been violated, destroying any chance there was of the peace between the two nations. As he cackled, two blades pierced through Asahi's chest, killing him instantly. Turns out with the last of her strength, Yatsuyu summoned twin ethereal blades to kill him, finally taking out the person she wanted to kill the most. With both siblings now dead, seemingly nothing remains to be dealt with. That is until Asahi's second-in-command, Maxima, reveals himself and that the faction that Asahi had spoken of within Garlemald does indeed exist, and he expresses his party's desire to finally bring Garlemald to peace with the other nations. Maxima also reveals that Zenos is very much alive, leading Alphinaud to suspect Ascian involvement and to accompany Maxima back to Garlemald to investigate. After splitting from Alphinaud and reuniting the Doman prisoners with their loved ones, the Scions return to Giribani to investigate where they had buried Zenos' body, to find that it was very much missing, and forces the heroes to start to try to figure out how the body had disappeared. Meanwhile, an unknown resistance soldier watches them, and later that same soldier uses a katana to kill a commanding officer, and it is also revealed that Zenos' mind had possessed the body of the mysterious soldier, leaving the question that if Zenos was in the soldier's body, who was in Zenos' body? Meanwhile, the ship that Alphino and Maxima are aboard is attacked while flying over the burn, an area devoid of any and all ether. Their attackers are other Garlean ships with no identification tags, and Alphino's ship crashes into the lifeless desert. He and the others he is with fight off the Garleans that emerge from the other ships, and a mysterious Garlean man with a gunblade then appears and begins attacking Alphino's assailants. And once the battle is over, Alphino's group chooses to follow the man rather than waste away in the burn. In conclusion, patch 4.3 Under the Moonlight closes off the story of the last of Stormblood's 3 main villains. And while many things happen in the end of this patch, much of it is devoted to finishing off Yatsu's character arc, and gives us one of the most haunting parts of the game in both the lead up and the main part of Castrum Fluminus. Patches 4.1 to 4.3 are 3 great patches that properly tie up many of Stormblood's loose ends. While there are some very intense and climactic moments, the majority of these patches is spent on character development and introducing yet another nuance to Stormblood's overall story. As in these patches, it is truly when we get to know and come to sympathize with those on the other side of the conflict, whose perspective Stormblood chose to shy away from properly showing. However, choosing to tie up these loose ends here was a fantastic decision, and while actively being at war, you were rarely concerned with the morals, driving factors, and backgrounds of your enemies, as all you see them doing is fighting against the people and things you care about, and thinking too much about it could get you killed. However, after the conflict is over, you and those around you can take time to reflect and try to understand why things turned out the way they did and what led to them. And that part after the battle is exactly where patches 4.1 to 4.3 take place, and it's honestly harrowing to learn everything that we do within these patches, and gives clarity to much of the interactions within Stormblood, as well as also filling many of its plot holes, which many people don't seem to realize were intentionally left there. While 3.1 to 3.3 were the perfect ending for Heavensward, and they were much more triumphant and action-packed, which befitted that story, 4.1 to 4.3 is a perfect ending for Stormblood and is a much more reflective and somber piece of the game, which much better reflects the expansion's overall narrative. And this might be a bit of a hot take, but when people complain about Stormblood and its patches saying things like, oh, they're bad, or they don't have enough action or epic moments, yet they also say that they are highly invested in the game's overall story and characters, they just sound stupid, and it seems that they don't really care as much as they say they do. I know that is a bit of a possibly controversial way to end the video, but I felt like it really needed to be said, as I am extremely tired of hearing people bag on Stormblood and its patches for no good reason, and when asked, often having nothing to support their claims. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. While Stormblood's narrative may not be 100% under wraps even to this day, I feel like these patches tie up the ends that need to be tied up to consider the expansion story to be complete. Which means next time we finally move into Shadowbringers territory, which I know many of you are excited for. Per norm, that video will be out 2 weeks after this one, though depending on how far into the future you are watching this, there may just be a little card in the top right for you to click on and go instantly to that video. But to end off, as always, my name is Lokidum, thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.